Welcome to the 15th video in the Colored Pencil course, brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com, Portrait Drawing Part 3. In this module, we'll continue our look at portrait drawing with colored pencils. The focus of this module will be on drawing the mouth, including the lips and the teeth. It is important to understand that no one formula for drawing the mouth will work for every subject. However, there are specific things that we can look for to help ensure success. 3 concepts should be considered when drawing a mouth. The first, the illusion of lips, is created by the relationships of subtle highlights and shadows and strong highlights and shadows. A full range of value will exist on most lips. The second, cross-contour lines are visible on most lips and should be included in the drawing. And the third, teeth are not white. So let's take a look at adding the mouth to our portrait drawing, which is already in progress. As we just discussed, our lips will be dependent on certain relationships between strong highlights and subtle highlights, as well as strong shadows and subtle shadows. And these relationships will create a full range of value, which will lead to the illusion of realistic lips. We also need to consider cross-contour lines, which are visible on most lips. We'll begin by filling in a base tone for the lips. In this case, we'll begin with peach. This is a medium to light application. Next, we'll gently add an application of magenta. As with the other areas, we want to gradually build up the color and value relationships. This is why we start so light with our applications. Next, we'll add a bit of sienna brown. This will tone down some of the magenta that we just applied. As we get into the areas where the cross-contour lines are more evident, we'll make sure that our marks that are made with the pencil follow these cross-contour lines. Tuscan red is applied next with a bit more pressure. Lips contain a complexity of different colors. It's important that you notice these relationships between the colors so that you can slowly build undertones that in the end will translate as the accurate color. Again, it's very clear to see the cross-contour lines on the bottom portions of the lips. Next, we'll go ahead and preserve the areas of strong highlight using a heavy application of white. We do this before too much colored material is applied to the surface. In most cases, these areas of strong highlight will be more predominant on the bottom lips. Using dark umber, we can begin to establish some of the areas of dark shadow that exist on each corner of the lips. Subtle areas of shadow exist in various areas on the bottom and upper lip. We'll address these again with dark umber. Then, using the colorless blender, we'll work them into the surface. We'll continue to work the colorless blender all around the lips, working the textured marks that we've applied into the surface, creating a smoother appearance. To make the lips feel more natural, we'll use a bit of the base tone color that we've used for the skin tone. In this case, it's beige, so the beige color is worked over the top of the surface, using it almost as a burnishing tool. Again, we'll continue to work the dark shadows, gradually building up the layers until we arrive at a value that's accurate. To maintain the warm color that's necessary, dark umber is used to build up these shadows. A slight bit of purple is detected in the photo reference. For this reason, a very light application of dark purple is used in the corners of the mouth. The entire lips again receive another heavy application of peach, burnishing in the layers that have already been established. At this point in the drawing, we have enough information on the lips that we can move on to the teeth and the inside portions of the mouth. First, cream is used, preserving areas of highlight that exist. Next, white is used with a heavy application to create those areas of highlight. We can also begin in the corners of the mouth to establish the dark areas, first with a heavy application of dark umber. This color is worked all around the edges of the teeth, helping to define the shapes of the teeth further. Crimson Lake is used as an initial base tone for the color of the gums. Again, this helps establish the shape of the teeth. Burnt ochre is layered on top to help tone down the intensity of the red. These colors are then burnished using peach. Although we typically think of teeth as being white, they're often a light cream or a light yellow color. They also have areas of shadow and highlight in them. We have first originally built up an application of cream, then we go over it with a heavy application of white. We can establish a few areas of shadow using dark umber, and then we can aggressively add a heavy application of cream. In this case, the cream is applied close to the areas of shadow. We can then clean up edges and burnish necessary places using white. A bit of the bottom teeth are visible in this case, so just a touch of cream will do. We'll also start to create a heavier shadow by going over the areas of dark umber with indigo blue. We can further push the shadows that exist in between each tooth with an application of dark umber. Here, we can establish the line for the lips just a bit further with a very subtle line added with dark umber on both the top and bottom lips. Shadows in the corner parts of the mouth can be pushed further, again with dark umber. We can also make these areas darker with an application of indigo blue. These colors, of course, will mix to create a more natural looking black. Now we're ready to turn our attention to some of the areas around the mouth. We'll begin by laying down a base tone of beige. Then we'll begin to establish some of the shadows that exist in the corners of the mouth and just underneath the nose, just above the mouth. We'll do this initially with dark umber and sienna brown. We'll also use light umber to tone down the strength of the dark umber. These areas are then burnished using the beige. We can strengthen some of the areas of highlight. In this case, there's a strong highlight on the upper part of the lip. White is applied first and then burnished using beige. Peach is also incorporated in the mix for the skin tone in a few areas on the upper lip. A medium to heavy application is used here. Since our goal is to slowly build up the necessary colors and values, an approach to layering colors similar to the one used on the nose will be used in areas around the mouth. In this case, a bit of light umber is used. Dark umber is also used to darken up the areas of shadow. These areas are then subsequently burnished using the base tone of beige. Highlights can be strengthened with white, and then the shadows developed further, in this case with sienna brown. We'll continue this process of layering colors and burnishing them until we arrive at colors, tones, and values that closely resemble those in the photo reference. Not all areas will be burnished using the beige. In this case, a few areas will be burnished using the colorless blender. The beige will affect the value and color. A colorless blender, however, will affect the color less severely. In areas where a subtle highlight can be found, especially on the bottom portion of the lip, a bit of white is used. We'll also use light umber to begin to establish some of the subtle shadows that happen on the chin. These areas will be developed further in the next module. These areas are burnished using beige and a bit of peach. We can continue to work the shadows just underneath the nose and above the top lip until we arrive at a value that's more accurate and close to that of the photo reference. We'll repeat this process around the mouth with dark umber and then burnish those areas using beige or a colorless blender. We'll continue to burnish areas around the mouth with the colorless blender, ridding the area of any tooth or texture of the paper. We can also burnish areas and tone down areas of strong contrast using the beige. So what did we discuss in this module? Well, first, we continued our look at portrait drawing with colored pencils by focusing on the mouth. We learned that the illusion of lips is created by the relationships of subtle highlights and shadows and strong highlights and shadows, leading to a full range of value. We also learned that cross-contour lines are visible on most lips and should be included in the drawing. We also learned that teeth are not white. In the next module in this series, we'll look at developing the skin tones and finishing off the face.